The day Marcus told me to leave our home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply watched his lips move as he delivered the speech he'd obviously rehearsed. Something about growing apart and finding himself, 23 years of marriage, and he couldn't even look me in the eyes while ending it. "Catherine," he said, fingers tapping nervously on his Italian leather desk, the one I'd surprised him with on our 15th anniversary. "I think we both know this isn't working anymore." I sat in my usual chair, the one facing his home office window with its view of the Manhattan skyline. The same chair where I'd sat countless times before, discussing our dreams, our future, our shared life. Now I was watching that life crumble while the sunset painted the city in shades of gold and pink. "Is it Amanda?" I asked quietly, though I already knew the answer. His slight flinch was all the confirmation I needed. She understands me, Kathy." Marcus ran his hand through his graying hair, a nervous habit I'd watched develop over decades. "We connect on a different level. She's younger, yes, but it's more than that." Of course she was younger. Amanda Phillips, his 28-year-old marketing director, with her perfect teeth and CrossFit-toned body. I'd watched their connection develop over company holiday parties and late-night strategy sessions. I'd chosen to ignore it, convinced that what Marcus and I had built was stronger than a midlife crisis in Louboutins. What Marcus didn't know, what he'd never bothered to ask, was that I'd been preparing for this moment. Not because I'm psychic, but because I'm thorough. It's what made me successful in my own right, before I stepped back to support his dreams. "How long do I have?" I asked, my voice steady. "I've had my lawyer draw up initial papers. He suggests you move out by the end of the week." Marcus pulled out a manila envelope, sliding it across his desk with all the emotion of someone passing a grocery receipt. "I'll be generous with the settlement, of course. You can keep the house in the Hamptons." I almost laughed. The Hamptons house, our summer cottage that needed more maintenance than it was worth? He was trying to buy my dignity with a money pit. "That's thoughtful of you," I replied, not touching the envelope. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out my own folder, cream-colored, expensive stock from my private attorney's office. "But I think we should discuss something else first." His eyebrows furrowed. "What's that?" "The real estate holdings in Singapore. The ones under Shell Corporation B." The color drained from Marcus's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? Because the documentation seems quite clear." I opened my folder with deliberate slowness. It's fascinating how many papers accumulate in a home office over 2 decades, especially when someone works late and leaves things in the printer queue. His jaw clenched. I'd seen that expression before, when deals went south, when competitors gained ground, but never directed at me. "You went through my private files?" "No, Marcus. I went through our files. Because despite what your girlfriend might think, I'm not just the wife who picked out your ties and hosted dinner parties. I was your partner. And unlike you, I never forgot that. Catherine, whatever you think you found, stop." I held up my hand. "Let's not insult each other. You've been moving company assets through dummy corporations since 2019. Small amounts at first, then larger ones, all perfectly concealed from the board, the shareholders, and your mistress." He stood abruptly, his chair rolling back to hit the wall. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Those transactions are completely legitimate. The SEC might disagree." I kept my voice level, my hand steady as I laid out document after document, especially regarding the transfers to the Cayman accounts. The sun had fully set now, leaving us in the dim glow of his desk lamp. In the shadows, he looked older, smaller somehow. The mighty Marcus Chen, CEO of Rising Tech Solutions, brought low by his own paper trail. "What do you want?" His voice had lost its rehearsed confidence. "I want what I've earned." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "Half of everything, the legitimate assets and the hidden ones. I want my name cleared from any corporate documents, and full immunity if this ever comes to light." "You're blackmailing me." "No, I'm negotiating. There's a difference." I gathered my papers, tucking them back into their folder. "You taught me that, remember? During our 2nd year of marriage, when you were still hustling for venture capital funding." He slumped back into his chair, defeat etched across his features. "You've really thought this through. I learned from the best. You always said never to go into a deal without leverage." The next few weeks passed in a blur of lawyers, mediators, and paperwork. Marcus moved out, not into Amanda's sleek downtown apartment as he'd planned, but into a hotel while we figured things out. His tone was different now, almost respectful. I stayed in our penthouse, sleeping in the master bedroom that still held traces of our shared life. At night, I'd sit on the balcony, watching the city pulse below, remembering how we'd started with nothing but dreams and student loan debt. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd managed our social calendar, maintained our image, played the perfect corporate wife, all while quietly building my own safety net, watching and learning as Marcus constructed his house of cards. The first crack in Marcus's facade came during a meeting with both our legal teams. Amanda was there, perched beside him in a designer suit that screamed, "Future trophy wife." I watched her face as my lawyer methodically laid out the terms of our proposed settlement. "These numbers can't be right," she interrupted, pointing at the document. "The company valuation is accurate," my lawyer finished smoothly, "including all subsidiary holdings and offshore accounts." I saw the moment it hit her, the realization that her young, vibrant CEO wasn't just wealthy. He was running a scheme that could land him in federal prison. Her perfect features twisted into something ugly as she turned to Marcus. "You told me everything was above board," she hissed. Marcus didn't respond. He couldn't. We both watched as Amanda grabbed her Prada bag and stormed out, her heels clicking in angry rhythm down the hallway. "Can we clear the room?" Marcus asked quietly. Once our lawyers left, he looked at me with tired eyes. "You could have exposed everything. Why didn't you?" "Because despite everything, I remember who you were, who we were." I leaned forward. "We built this life together, Marcus. I'm not going to burn it down just because you lost your way." "I never meant." He stopped, shaking his head. "I got caught up in it all, the power, the money, the attention. Amanda made me feel young again. And now? Now I feel like a fool. A fool with a way out," I reminded him. "My terms are fair. I take half of everything, legitimate and otherwise. You clean up the books, slowly and legally. We part ways with our reputations and freedom intact." He nodded slowly, studying my face. "You always were the smarter one. I just didn't want to see it." "No, you didn't want to acknowledge it. There's a difference." I stood up, gathering my things. "Have your lawyer draw up the papers. The real ones this time." As I headed for the door, he called out, "Catherine?" I paused, hand on the doorknob. "I'm sorry. Not just for Amanda. For taking you for granted. For forgetting who we were." The divorce proceedings moved quickly after that. Marcus became surprisingly cooperative, working with financial advisors to untangle the mess he'd created. Amanda disappeared from the picture entirely, though I heard through mutual friends that she'd taken a job with a competitor. I moved forward too. The day the papers were finalized, I bought a smaller apartment downtown, not because I couldn't afford to keep the penthouse, but because I wanted a fresh start. Something that was purely mine. The media speculated about our split, of course. The business world loves nothing more than a power couple's dissolution, but all they saw was an amicable division of assets, a mutual decision to part ways. Our secret remained just that, secret. 6 months later, I ran into Marcus at Le Bernardin. He was dining alone, looking older, but somehow lighter. I was there celebrating the launch of my new consulting firm with my team. Our eyes met across the room, and after a moment's hesitation, he walked over to my table. "You look well," he said, and meant it. "So do you." I gestured to my companions. "We're celebrating." "I just landed the Jensen account." His eyebrows rose. The Jensen Group had been one of Rising Tech's biggest targets for years. Impressive, though I shouldn't be surprised. "No, you shouldn't," I smiled, not unkindly. "Would you like to join us?" He shook his head. "Some bridges can't be rebuilt, Kathy, but I'm glad you're thriving." As I watched him walk away, I felt the last traces of bitterness dissolve. We'd both gotten what we deserved in the end. He kept his company and his freedom, though now he carried the weight of knowing how close he'd come to losing it all. I got my independence, my dignity, and yes, my fair share. The truth is, I never wanted to destroy him. What I wanted was recognition, not just of my worth as his wife, but of my intelligence, my capability, my strength. In trying to discard me, he'd finally been forced to see all of that. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. The last of the transfers had been completed. I was now officially wealthier than I'd ever been as Mrs. Chen. That night, back in my new apartment with its view of Central Park, I opened the safe behind my bedroom mirror. Inside was one last folder, the original documents I'd discovered, along with backup drives containing every transaction I'd tracked. I ran my fingers over the papers, remembering the night I'd first found them. The shock, the hurt, the slow-burning anger that had turned to calculated planning. I could have used them to ruin him, to exact the kind of revenge that scorned wives dream about. Instead, I'd used them as leverage to claim what was rightfully mine. Not just the money or the properties, but my own place in the world I'd helped build. I fed the papers into my shredder, watching as years of secrets turned to confetti. The next morning, I woke up to several missed calls from Marcus. When I finally called back, his voice was uncharacteristically hesitant. "The board wants to bring you on as a consultant," he said. "They were impressed by how you landed Jensen." I laughed. "Are you sure that's wise?" "Probably not. But you're the best, and they know it. No strings attached, completely professional." I thought about it for a moment. "I'll have my team review any proposal you send over." "Fair enough." He paused. "You know, I've been seeing someone new." "Oh?" "A therapist. Turns out I have some issues to work through." "Don't we all?" I replied, and meant it. Life has a way of coming full circle. 1 year after Marcus asked me to leave our home, I sat across from him in a board meeting, presenting my recommendations for Rising Tech's restructuring. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Some of the board members who'd known me as Marcus's wife now looked at me with new respect. I wasn't just the woman who'd organized their charity galas anymore. I was the strategist who'd transformed 3 struggling companies in the past year. Marcus caught my eye during the presentation, giving me a small nod. We'd found our new normal, a professional détente built on mutual respect and shared secrets. It wasn't friendship, but it was something we could both live with. That evening, I had dinner with my sister Claire, who'd supported me through the worst of the divorce. "Did you ever think about exposing him?" she asked, swirling her wine. "Really making him pay for what he did?" I considered the question carefully. "Revenge is easy," I said finally. "Building something new is harder, but it lasts longer. Look at you, all zen and wise," she teased. "Not zen, just practical." I smiled. Besides, destroying him would have meant destroying part of myself too. 23 years isn't just erased, no matter how badly it ends. You're a better person than I am. No, just a better strategist. Late that night, I found myself looking through old photos on my laptop. There we were, young, ambitious, in love. Marcus in his first cheap suit, me in the dress I'd worn to countless investor meetings. We'd been unstoppable then, before success changed us both. I came across a picture from our 20th anniversary. Marcus was giving a speech, champagne in hand, telling everyone how I was the secret to his success. He'd meant it then, I think, even if he'd forgotten it later. The photos ended at our last Christmas together. I'd sensed something was wrong but couldn't put my finger on it. Now I could see it clearly, the distance in his eyes, the way he'd angled himself away from me in every shot. People often ask me if I miss being married. The truth is I miss who we were, not who we became. I miss the partnership, the shared dreams, the inside jokes that only make sense after decades together. But I don't miss living in someone else's shadow. I don't miss the constant calculation, watching for signs of betrayal. And I certainly don't miss the woman I'd become, the quiet observer, the secret keeper, the wife who knew too much. Now I'm just Catherine, not Marcus Chen's wife, not Rising Tech's secret weapon, just me. I have my own office downtown, my own dreams to chase, my own life to live. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's simply becoming who you were always meant to be, without apology or explanation. The trump card I held wasn't just the evidence of financial misconduct. It was the knowledge that I was stronger than anyone, including myself, had ever suspected. It was the understanding that endings can also be beginnings, if you're brave enough to see them that way. As for Marcus, last I heard, he's dating someone age-appropriate and seeing his therapist twice a week. We're both doing better apart than we ever did together. And that perhaps is the greatest triumph of all.